Hey y'all, welcome back to another book review with the Tripod YouTube channel. Today we'll be discussing Dodgers to Damascus. I yet again have a book where I have lost the book jacket. Well, I didn't lose it. I definitely have it. But like many of my books, I carry it around in a giant purse and I end up taking the book jacket off because it's like getting in my way. Um, so this is Dodgers to Damascus without the book jacket. Another excellent read. This is a biography about David Lesch, written by Catherine Nixon Cooke, who I am so excited to interview for an upcoming Tripod episode on, well, September 9th is our recording date, but I don't have a release date yet for you all. But this is my most recent read, and I recently flew home to Chicago and I read basically the whole book on that. It was like a 3 hour flight. This book isn't super long. It's a little over 200 pages and so many great images in it as well. I'm getting deja vu to my fly fishing book read where I was like, oh, there's so many good pictures. But biography really, like, it should be enhanced with photos. You should get to know the person and see them physically and their family and whoever else they're talking about. So there's a lot of great images in this book that really help ground you in David Lesch's story and who he is and what he stands for. So to give kind of a brief summary, Dodgers to Damascus is a biography written by Catherine Nixon Cooke, who is an awesome author. I'll pull up her biography. How about that? I'll read her about the author. She is the award-winning author of 7 biographies, and she's the former CEO of the Mountain Institute, the World Affairs Council of San Antonio, and the Mind Science Foundation, and a fellow medalist of the Explorers Club. She lives on a farm in the Texas Hill Country. So she's a prolific author. She's written several biographies, and she's written a couple TU Press publications as well. So David has been her recent subject of biography, and David Lesch is a professor at Trinity University. He teaches Middle Eastern studies, and he's also conflict resolution specialist. I'm unsure if he actually teaches a course on that at Trinity, but he's given so many lectures on the subject that he may as well have his own class for how many Trinity University students get to attend those lectures and learn so much from him. I never had the opportunity to take one of his courses while I was at Trinity. I just wasn't in humanities department all that much. I was a communications major, so I was all focused on that. I took a few English classes, but never with him. But having read his book, I really wish I had, because he's been a professor for a long time, but he started as a Major League Baseball player for the Dodgers, the LA Dodgers. And what an incredible story. He, growing up, loved baseball, played baseball all the time, and ended up getting recruited to the Dodgers. But he was also heavily recruited by the Milwaukee Brewers, who is close to me. I grew up in the Chicago area, and I now have a family friend, Caleb Durbin, playing as an incredible rookie for the Brewers. So this was such a fun book to read. And my grandfather's all-time favorite team is the Dodgers. And also David Lesch, he mentions towards the end that the Orioles is one of his favorite teams, and my grandfather loves them as well. And so I felt super connected to this biography from the start, just off the rip with reading its summary. And I'm so glad I finished it off because at the end I was just like blown away. But anyway, to continue the summary, he starts as a Major League Baseball player, ends up getting injured later on in one of his seasons, and has to finish his career. And for a lot of people, that is such a tumultuous moment where you don't know where you're going to be going after an incident like that. I've played sports my whole life and I had an ACL tear going into college, and that kind of made all my recruitment fall away. And that was a really scary moment for me. So I can't imagine, well, I can imagine it because it's so well written in this book of just the devastating experience of having most of your life be dedicated to a sport and all of a sudden that's kind of falling away. My grandfather was a professional hockey player for the Toronto Maple Leafs and was blinded in his right eye. Yeah, his right eye at the beginning of, well, at the very end of like his first professional season, and ended up continuing to coach hockey for a very long time and sled hockey as well for the Glassa organization. So teaching people with disabilities and severe injuries, amputations, you name it, and just teaching them how to play sled hockey. And I've had the opportunity to play sled hockey, and it's incredible. But that's an aside. David, not really being fazed by this crazy injury. Well, I shouldn't say not phased. It's devastating to end a career like that, but chose to rebuild and push forward and ends up going back to school to get a master's degree. And he studies with some incredible professors and gets really involved in Middle Eastern history, conflict. This is when he was in school, it's pre 9/11. So there's still a lot of tumultuous things going on in the Middle East, but at this point, the USA is rather uninterested or distanced from the conflicts going on in Syria and Israel, Afghanistan. We're kind of relatively distanced. And David is just taken by the study of it. And he ends up making a really strong connection to the president of Syria, which I believe his name is Bashir al-Assad. I haven't written it down. I should have, but they become close. And David goes on to be this ambassador for Syria or to Syria for four US presidents. He discusses a bit of the Carter administration. He discussed with Trump as well. He wasn't a close ambassador to him, but they had discussions on the matter and several other presidents. And at the same time, being flown around globally, he's still teaching Middle Eastern studies. And I was just blown away because I can barely manage my own schedule, let alone if I was flying internationally multiple times a week, teaching nonstop. It was incredible to read about that. But I mean, as always, I have my notebook here and it's full. Like I have about 4 or 5 pages of notes on this book because I had just interviewed and I have that other book review on How Books Can Save Democracy by Michael Fisher, who is another TU Press author like David. Although David's written four other books at this point before publishing or being the subject of a biography for Daughters to Damascus. So he's a prolific writer as well. But after interviewing and reading How Books Can Save Democracy by Michael Fisher, I saw so many connections between their two books. Just talking about the power of education, the humanities, arts, reading on the success of democracy and its ability to thrive with its citizens being educated and empathetic and open to disagreement. Because throughout this book, David is able to successfully negotiate and navigate between a Syrian president who's facing lots of pressure from citizens, other political influences, other countries on what he should do going into a new presidency, facing lots of conflicts. And David is able to understand that side, but also see the United States perspective, how we're struggling with this conflict, how other countries are struggling with this conflict, what this could mean for the future of Syria, the United States, and their relations. It was incredible to not see somebody just self-serve and push for their doctrine, but to understand where somebody else is coming from, be empathetic, and be able to adjust and compromise. That was the such an important theme and message of Michael Fisher's book, How Books Can Save Democracy. So this was such a great follow-up to that read. And again, I recommend this super highly. I I think I say this for every video, I swear, but again, this is not a book I normally pick up. I don't really read a lot of biographies, but TU Press does it again. I am really interested in this biography. I want to learn so much more about David, so I'm so excited for our upcoming episode. And I'm so excited to pick up some new biographies. I gotta ask Catherine which ones she recommends because it's incredible. And that's several of my questions that I plan on asking her is the importance of biographies, the importance of reading others' stories and recording them and writing them down. Because getting more into the themes and significance of this book, that was a huge takeaway for me of David forging this personal, emotional connection with a leader of a country that he is not living in, that he has no personal allegiance to other than his academic interest in it from a research and professor's perspective, but still championing how welcoming and kind everybody in that area was to him, coming there with his family, his wife, and being welcomed. But you don't even get to that part, that messaging of the book until later on. The book opens with David being poisoned. And this is not the first time he's been poisoned as a US ambassador. And to still, he's very candid and saying, obviously, he was scared and disheartened that he could be attacked like that by people that he was trusting. But to be able to take a step back and gain perspective and realize people are acting out of fear, people are trying to defend what they believe in, and he happens to be a victim standing in the way of that. And I don't think a lot of people would be able to have the perspective and forgiveness on that matter. If you're poisoned, I think your first instinct is to retaliate, to be upset, to want to defend yourself. But no, like David takes poisoning in stride more than once and still finds a way to remain level-headed and be an astute negotiator. This really reminded me of everything Michael Fisher was saying in his book related to Nelson Mandela. Not necessarily to put those big shoes to fill for David, but truly being a master negotiator and not letting anything get to you, not even being poisoned. So this was an excellent opening to the book. I was immediately shocked, and I was like, how is this guy going to end up being an ambassador when he's dealing with being poisoned? In addition, Catherine Cooke, the author of the biography, uses the intro related to being poisoned as a great way to kind of, through like a hallucinogenic state, kind of float between past and present early on in the book. So you're able to kind of float back in time with David to getting into the Dodgers, being a baseball player, being super close to his family, his older brother, his parents, all of this. You gain all this information while at the same time in the back of your mind, like, okay, my main guy in this book has been poisoned. When are we going to find out about that? So excellent choice by the writer. I was immediately hooked. I had so many questions. Yeah. So excellent job on that front. But to touch back to the major theme of remaining empathetic, and I have a quote here, the power of supreme empathy and love. And he's discussing this in the sense of he's talking about Miss Yule, which is the mother of a journalist who's been missing for 13 years. And the fact that she's speaking out of love and empathy is, again, another incredible example. But she's an author, right? She's a poet. And just the power that you're able to show through that is incredible. So, reading and the humanities was another huge theme here. And I was blown away by the ability of David and other personalities in this book to remain level-headed during such an intense conflict. Not really circling back, but another note on the introduction that isn't so much about writing skills, but thematic, is foreword is written by Peter C. Goldmark. And it's a great foreword. It's real short, which is awesome because you're trying to jump into the biography. You're not wanting to read 5 pages of foreword, personally, as somebody who's not a big biography reader. But so Peter C. Goldmark writes the foreword. And one of the main things that he brings up is that everybody is kind of feeling lost in this fluid period, is what he calls it. I thought this is a continuing theme in the book, right? Of everything that's going on in our political climate right now is putting us into a fluid period. There's so much flux and change and constant, I don't know, ups and downs all the time that it feels hard to ground yourself and keep up. The grounding yourself aspect very much reminds me of the purpose of why I make Tripod, the podcast related to this YouTube channel, because that's kind of the whole point of bringing in authors and teachers like David and Catherine to help us learn to ground ourselves in this time by learning about other people, how to engage with the places we live in, and therefore make the planet a better place, something where we're not feeling so fluid and ungrounded all the time. So immediately I felt really encouraged to continue the work that I do. But also, I think that's such a great question. How do we ground ourselves and gain perspective in such a fluid time where we're being asked to polarize ourselves, label ourselves, put ourselves in black or white when there's so much gray? There's so much gray right now. And David's book does an excellent job of exploring that. The things that can ground ourselves in this book. David, this is a quote from the book, is as human beings, we are the same, and this is something we need to think more about. I found this so simple and it's so innate. We all know this. We're reminded of this constantly. But especially in the lens of having read Michael Fisher's book, How Books Can Save Democracy, this felt like a really resonant message to me of we are all so similar. David really champions how everybody in Syria and the many other places he visited around the world were so welcoming, so neighborly, offering meals, housing, everything. And I feel like as I'm 22 and living in the South, and but I'm originally from Chicago, I have not grown up with that neighborly sort of energy. Maybe when I was a kid, before I was kind of in my teenage years, people were a little bit more neighborly. You'd kind of be invited over, little house parties every now and then. But now I think people are really distanced from one another because any little thing can set off those disagreements and those polarizing factors, right? So that felt like a really important message to me within the book across everything. Because despite everything that David goes through, like being poisoned, he finds a way to see the humanity in everybody. And he credits that hugely to his education and his love for the humanities and then his love for people. He knows so many people. It's crazy. And others in his book kind of comment on that. But I thought that was a great theme to take away, is that we are also similar, no matter what's going on. And yeah, so that was a great theme to come away from this. And there are more. On the same vein, saying that all people are really similar, multiple times in the biography, David emphasizes the power of listening, and he really admires good listeners, that we speak too much on what we don't know, or what we assume to know, what we claim to know. But we would know so much more if we listened to others and just let them speak and hear what they have to say, and then think your response through. I think we see it all the time in the debates that we watch, our media, that jumping in immediately and getting your word in and speaking louder and above others has become valuable when those who are quiet and listen and really take in information are seen as kind of characters in the background or pacifists, when in reality, those people are really powerful because they're understanding their opponents, other debaters, other politicians, lawyers, people, to be their not to be their adversary, but their teacher, somebody who's going to show them their personal life, their personal beliefs, and where those are coming from through their words. Trying to speak over those people only hinders your ability to communicate. And David does a great job of highlighting great listeners that he has experienced, as well as showing how he has put the power of listening into his own life, which has made him the ambassador to US presidents, and teaching that to his students all the time in discussions, in lectures, how important listening is, because otherwise you're missing where somebody is coming from, which could give you an advantage in helping them see your point of view. If you don't understand them, how are they going to understand you? And how can you expect them to understand you? So I liked that small note of the power of listening and how it's really been neglected with how much noise there is in our current time, that people aren't just willing to sit and let something play out and truly understand what somebody's trying to say. We're already thinking of our response and the next step in a discussion before we even take in what the person we're talking to has said, which I cannot agree more with. People are trying to look for the most triggering, rage baiting thing that they can say to get views a lot of the time, right? Rather than saying what they really mean or saying it in a tactful, empathetic way, rather than trying to garner an intense response or regurgitate things that we've heard other people say and posturing in that way, where we're pretending to speak about something or speak on something that we really have no innate knowledge of or emotional feeling about. And he talks about how posturing has become really damaging and is furthering the polarization that we are facing, which is making our democracy suffer. And how to kind of reduce posturing. How do we focus on simply what we know and what's important to us, and making people see that with kind eyes and open minds, rather than trying to impress somebody or make them feel less than by posturing. And he reverts back again to kind of the humanities and looking back at great negotiators and other ambassadors, other people he admires, and how they would handle those situations, how they would handle those discussions. Would they bring up something that maybe makes them look more powerful or more knowledgeable? Or would they try to make a connection, an emotional connection with the person they're talking to or trying to negotiate or compromise with? People are motivated through emotion and perspective. Posturing doesn't do anything but put somebody on the defense. So I really found the phrase posturing and the idea of somebody saying something simply to get a certain response, typically a negative one, typically an overreaction, because they're on the defensive, does nothing but damage. And it keeps us from listening once again, because we're thinking too much on what we're saying and what response we're going to manipulate out of somebody rather than what's actually going to make somebody listen to you. So that was a small aside, but something I found really powerful and a really great phrasing. I think posturing isn't necessarily something that's talked about a lot. I think fake, faking is something, but posturing doesn't have to be fake. It could just be manipulative in a lot of ways. So I found that phrasing really interesting and was a good note on the theme of listening and being empathetic. So that was a huge takeaway for me. And I have a million and one other takeaways from this, but I'm so looking forward to meeting David and Catherine and asking them so many of these questions. But that is my review of Dodgers to Damascus. There is a discount code if you order it from the Trinity University Press, which is Dodgers20 with a 20% discount. So if you liked this review and found it exciting, go check it out at tupress.org. Bye.